right. So let's talk about burnout. I mean, that's why you guys are here today. So let's begin. As I mentioned, today's topic will be how to prevent caregiver burnout. And while I want to mention that I personally am not an expert on burnout or anything like that, I have thoroughly researched this topic because I knew it's what I wanted to talk to you about today, and I wanted to give you helpful, accurate information. A lot of the things that I share with you today will come from this book, a book called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. I know that the information that I've studied will help and benefit you, and I invite you to do your own research on how you can best identify, prevent, and heal from burnout. So what is burnout? Let's begin by talking about where it came from. First coined as a technical term by Herbert Freudenberger in 1975, burnout was defined by three components. Number one, emotional exhaustion, the fatigue that comes from caring too much for too long. Two, depersonalization, the depletion of empathy, caring, and compassion. And number three, decreased sense of accomplishment, an unconquerable sense of futility, or in other words, feeling that nothing you do makes any difference. Reading this definition, it's no wonder that caregivers are at a high risk of burnout. The literal name we have given is caregiver. Therefore, it's to no one's surprise that your role can leave you feeling fatigued for giving too much care. Constantly caring can also lead to a depletion of empathy, and constantly focusing on others and worrying about the different treatments and outcomes, whether this remission will last, side effects, etc., can often leave you with a feeling that nothing you do makes any difference. Later in this presentation, Ann Bailey is going to share with you how to deal with what is in your control versus what is not in your control, as it's something that all cancer caregivers have to deal with. However, I did want to validate the fact that having many things outside of your control can commonly lead to a decreased sense of accomplishment. Again, this definition just shows me that myeloma caregivers are at a high risk for burnout. There's no doubt. But the question is, what do we do? I think it's crucial to understand why we experience burnout. Now that we know what burnout is as a definition, let's take a closer look at why burnout occurs. Burnout occurs when we are stuck in the stress cycle. So what does this mean? Emotions are physical reactions that your body has to certain situations. I used to think that emotions were just in the mind, but the more that I've studied, I realized that emotions literally occur in your body. They are physical reactions. And they are not meant to be permanent. They have a cyclical nature, meaning that they have a start and they have an end and they go through a cycle. You can also think of the emotions as tunnels, that you have to go through the tunnel in order to get the light at the end of the tunnel. So what happens when we get stuck in that tunnel? Or what happens when we get stuck in an emotion? Well, it's burnout. So these emotional cycles are often referred to as the stress cycle. And in order to prevent being stuck in an emotion, leading to emotional exhaustion, otherwise known as burnout, we need to understand what is happening to our body and why we could get stuck feeling stress, even though we've resolved a situation. So in order to do this, we need to separate stress, or that physical reaction that happens and lives within our body, from the stressor itself. The stressor. What is a stressor? Stressors are what activate the stress response in your body. So there are external stressors such as work or family drama or kids or money or cultural norms and expectations. And then there are internal stressors, which are less tangible, like self-criticism, body image, identity, memories, and the future in general. You can add taking care of somebody you love with a chronic illness as a cherry on top of all of those stressors. There are many stressors in your life that can affect you. And I think this is a good time to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, which has basically become a perfect storm for burnout. Often you are constantly on call as a caregiver with little to no breaks, or with little breaks and little relief, especially as we are stuck in our homes and we can't go out as much. It's hard to think about something else besides multiple myeloma, and it's almost impossible to get personal time. Especially as you take care of somebody with a compromised immune system, you're having to delay things or cancel things that you were looking forward to, and that is disappointing. It is not an easy time to be a myeloma caregiver or a myeloma patient at this time. So as I mentioned, you have so much going on in your life that can act as a stressor. You have your personal stressors, and you also have a role and a responsibility that basically invites stress over for dinner. So remember, it's important that we separate the stressor from the stress or the emotion of stress itself. And the stress cycle itself begins when we are faced with a stressor. We are confronted with something that physically triggers our stress hormones, and we're going to be talking about what stress is in our body, what it looks like, what it feels like. But let's take a moment and think about what are some stressor situations that could be happening to you as myeloma caregivers. I gave some general examples, but now I want to talk more specific. What happens when your loved one reacts in a harsh way due to their own emotional exhaustion, or their physical exhaustion? Perhaps they react in a poor way due to their own stress or side effects due to certain medications. Maybe your workday was stressful, but when you come home, your day doesn't end. There are still the caregiver responsibilities on your shoulders. Perhaps the doctor's appointment didn't go as well as you would like it to, and you received some tragic or distressing news. Perhaps money is tight because medical bills are high and drug copays are high, and you're stressed about your finances. Maybe your scheduled self-care, that you had a night out with your friends, or you had a hot bath waiting for you, but that was overlooked or forgotten because of other extenuating circumstances. Each of these situations triggers stress hormones and causes your body to prepare for fight or flight. Let's talk more about the actual emotional stress that happens inside your body, which, remember, is different from the stressor. When you encounter any type of stressor, what is the stress? So stress, the emotion, is the I have a hard time pronouncing this, neurological and physiological shift that happens in our body when we encounter a stressor or one of the situations that I just mentioned. It's an evolutionary adaptive response that helps us cope with stressors. It involves neurological and hormonal activities that initiate physiological change. Your heart beats faster, your blood pumps harder to all of your muscles, your blood pressure increases, and you breathe more quickly. Anciently, when stressors included encountering a lion or some other wild animal, your body's stress response was activated so that you could either run away from the lion, which is flight, or if your body and mind assessed that you might have a chance of winning the fight with the lion, you might stay to fight. In modern day, our stressors look significantly different than finding a lion out in the wild. But our stress response, the actual reaction of our body, hasn't evolved that far. Our muscles still tense, our senses are still heightened, our entire body and mind change in response to this stressor. And as mentioned before, the choice is given to us, fight or flight. I'll be honest with you, I usually choose flight when it comes to my stressful situations. Money is tight. I'll talk about it next week when I don't have as many events going on. My son, who needs his nap, is not going down and is annoying me. I'm going to leave him in his crib to self-soothe, and I'm going to walk into the other room. Perhaps the doctor's visit didn't go as well as I thought, like I mentioned, and I just figure, let's wait until next time to see if it gets worse. That's not something I recommend, by the way. Family drama ensues at a Thanksgiving dinner table. I'm going to get up and walk away. Even if you choose flight, like I commonly do, If we don't deal with the physical stress, the heart pounding, the elevated blood pressure, the mind racing that is in our body, if we don't close that stress cycle, then we get stuck in the emotion. We experience emotional exhaustion and we lead to burnout. So how can we prevent this? In other words, how can we close that stress cycle? Well, the most efficient way and the most effective way to complete the stress cycle is through exercise. You can run, you can swim, you can walk, you can dance around your living room, you can sweat it out in a Zumba class, or do anything that moves your body enough to get you breathing deeply. I had an experience when I was studying what burnout is, where I was feeling really emotionally exhausted. And I realized as I read this that maybe I should put into practice what I was learning. So I used to take kickboxing years ago, and I decided to put on my gloves and shadow box, which basically means you're not punching anyone or anything. Even though at the moment I did feel like punching someone or something, I decided to just shadow box in my room. And it was amazing that as I did it, and I think it's because I had the knowledge of what was happening to my body, but when I was done with my 20 minutes of exercise, I could literally feel the stress cycle complete. And I would be really interested to hear from you, if even in the chat, or if you haven't experienced this yet, but now with this knowledge, if you experience it after this event, reach out to me and let me know what it's like for you to feel your body complete that stress cycle. Because to be honest, you can learn about something all day, but until you actually do something, that's when I learned the best, is when I put it into practice. So I would be interested to hear from you what it's like physically for you with that physical activity, closing the stress cycle. So do this for 20 to 60 minutes a day. And this physical activity, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be running. It can be whatever you feel comfortable with. And it should occur most days. After all, you are experiencing stressful situations almost every day, if not every day, as a caregiver. So you need to be closing the stress cycle every day. Emily and Angela Nagoski, the authors of the book that I mentioned earlier, say that physical activity is what tells your brain that you have successfully survived the threat or the stressor, and now your body is a safe place to live. Isn't that fascinating? That being said, I know plenty of people that hate exercise. My mother is one of them, and she famously quoted throughout all of my childhood a quote by Mark Twain that when she felt the need to exercise, she would lie down until it went away. So if you are one of those people, I completely understand. And luckily, there are more ways than just physical activity to close your stress cycle. And let's talk about them. Breathing. Deep, slow breaths downregulate the stress response, especially when the exhalation is long and slow and goes all the way until your stomach contracts. I'd actually like to practice this with the group, if you don't mind. If we just take an inhalation together and then an exhalation, long and slow. Near the end of the breath, you can feel your stomach naturally contract, and that is a physical reaction that is sending a message to your brain that you are ready to close that emotional cycle. You are ready to close the stress cycle. I just think that is amazing. Word of caution, it does work best when you aren't at your high point of stress, or when you are just wanting to siphon off some stress. So for example, when you are in that doctor's office and you receive that distressing news, and you know that you need to talk to your doctor about next steps, what is going to happen to your loved one, what does he suggest happens with your loved one's next treatment. So that is a time where you're telling your brain, okay, we have a lot of stress right now. My mind is racing, my heart is pumping, I feel the blood in my muscles. Time to take a couple deep breaths. And as you take those breaths, concentrating on the exhalation, the long, slow exhalation, then you will be able to trigger something in your mind that says, I'm trying to siphon off some stress. I'm trying to avoid burnout. Another situation, you just had a tiff or a fight with your loved one because you're both on edge, you're both emotionally exhausted, and you decide, flight, I'm going to leave the room. And it's important to note that while you've avoided or you've solved the stressor, you still need to complete the stress cycle of the stress. So because you're at a heightened point in stress and perhaps breathing won't be as efficient, something you can do is clench all of your muscles super tightly for 20 seconds. And then after that 20 seconds, you can breathe it out, shake it out with a big, long breath, and your stress level will have lowered significantly. Then you can be able to breathe, and the breathing will be more effective because you've lowered your initial really high stress level. Some other options: positive social interaction. Now, this has to do with strangers and acquaintances. So this isn't calling your best friend or giving your mom a hug. This is, for example, saying hi to somebody in the grocery store or at the doctor's office, or maybe messaging an acquaintance on Facebook and telling them that you're thinking of them. It's basically convincing your mind that the world is a safe and positive place to live. And as you do that, which I know it's hard during the COVID-19 pandemic, so be creative and find ways that you can experience positive social interaction with strangers and with acquaintances. But as you do this, you're going to be able to tell your mind that the world is a safe place to live in and that you're ready to close your emotional cycle. Laughter. Laughing increases relationship satisfaction. And something, when I was talking to Anne in preparation for this event, Anne told me that she will never again watch a movie where somebody dies or somebody has cancer. That's just not on her movies to watch. Instead, she chooses comedies to watch with her husband, and I love that. So with you and your loved one that you care for, is there a funny movie or a funny TV show that you can watch? Is there a hilarious podcast that you can listen to, or perhaps a book? Is there a friend that you can call that always makes you laugh? Inviting more laughter into your life will help you close those emotional cycles and end those stress cycles so that you can avoid burnout. Affection is something that is with somebody that you love and somebody that trusts you and somebody that connects with you. It's with somebody that you have an intimate relationship with. And it doesn't have to be physical affection, although this example that I'm about to give is physical affection. Safe and trusting hugs can actually prove just as useful as jogging 2 miles. And let's be real, I would rather hug somebody that I love for 20 seconds than run 2 miles. But they both do the same thing, which is help our body convince that we've escaped a threat. Research suggests that a 20-second hug, which may seem awkward at first because 20 seconds is a long time when you're hugging someone, it can change your hormones, it can lower your blood pressure and your heart rate, and it can improve your mood. The best thing that I learned when I was studying this, however, is that this affection doesn't have to occur between humans. If you have a furry friend, if you have a loved pet in your family who is part of the family, whether it be a cat or a horse or a dog, take 20 seconds nuzzling and petting that loyal, trusting animal, and that can do for you exactly what that 20-second hug would do for you as well. A big old cry. So don't believe the expression that crying doesn't solve anything, because sometimes it's what your body needs to close the stress cycle or to close the emotional cycle that you're in. When I had this knowledge, I was more compassionate to myself, because I usually say, oh, I hate crying, or crying doesn't solve anything. I've been known to say that. But as I realized that crying is sometimes a necessary step to take in order to close a stress cycle or an emotional cycle to avoid burnout, I was able to let myself cry more often, which sounds really silly, but it really did help sometimes. After a big old cry, I could feel the stress leave my body. I could feel the completion of the stress cycle. And then the last one is creative expression. So art provides and leaves room for big emotions. Take advantage of that. Listen to your favorite song. Listen to your favorite album. Sing along. Paint. If you aren't a painter but you want to be, take up painting. Write a poem. Use art to creatively express your big emotions so that you can complete those emotional and stress cycles. That is what I have for you today. That is my summary of what I have learned. And while it's important to talk about research like this, I think it's even more important to hear from real myeloma caregivers like yourself who have experienced this and just listen to their stories and what they have to share. So at this time, I would like to introduce you to our other speakers, Rosalind Height and Ann Bailey. Rosalind Height is the myeloma coach director, and she is the wife of myeloma patient Richard Height. Rosalind worked for many years as a pediatric occupational therapist. She is passionate about sharing resources and education that helps individuals improve the quality of their lives. She and her husband are the parents of 3 beautiful children. Ann Bailey is a retired teacher who has been married to her husband, John, for 51 years. They are the parents of 5 adult married children and grandparents to 17 grandchildren. John is a 17, almost 18-year multiple myeloma survivor. Ann has been his chief caregiver and cheerleader. She has been an eyewitness to each of his 50-plus bone marrow biopsies. That's a lot. With courage, determination, class, and humor, he has given their family and those around him an unbelievable gift, his life and how he has dealt with his myeloma challenges. I am so excited for you to hear from these women today, and I would like to turn the time over to Rosalind. Oh, Roz, I can't hear you. I see that you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Oh, dang, I don't know what's going on. That's okay, that happens sometimes. If you want to try leaving the meeting and coming back in, that sometimes works. So if you want to try doing that. But Ann, how about you share your slides? Does that sound okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Audrey asked me to share a little bit about what we went through in being diagnosed with multiple myeloma. About 17 years, nearly 18 years ago, we were carrying on with our life. My husband was out playing tennis, and his hip started to hurt him, and he thought it was a pain from his knee that he'd thrown out a couple of days before. But in subsequent workup, we found out a diagnosis of multiple myeloma. His profession at that time, he was a physician and actually a public health physician. Had about 200 employees. He's kind of our Dr. Fauci of what you're seeing on TV right now. He would diagnose all kinds of public health issues. At that time in medical school, he had only seen 1 case of multiple myeloma and was so unfamiliar with it to that extent. I had totally no clue what they were even talking about when that diagnosis came back. And at that time, if you think 13 years or 18 years ago, we had flip phones and the internet was not terrific like we have it right now. And so the sheer terror of trying to figure out who we would see and where we would get our help was somewhat overwhelming, to say the least. All of you who have been through that have kind of felt that same experience, I'm sure. We looked for a facility that had a myeloma specialist. Amazing, that was 18 years ago, and now they recommend it wholeheartedly. We traveled out of state, and that was where he got signed up on a clinical trial. And any of you who've done a clinical trial, reading just the paperwork that they give you to make that signature, that can be a heart-stopping experience. And so we went on the clinical trial. Insurance was denied out of state. A couple of issues like that, which subsequently got resolved. he ended up having 2 tandem transplants, and then was in remission for 15 years, and then relapsed after he'd been involved in marathons and civic duty and professional duty and military. And we thought our life was just going great, but it was not. So I am thinking about what I could share with you that would help you in your journey where you are with multiple myeloma. Some of you perhaps might be patients. Some of you may be caregivers. I just want to give you a sense of hope, and I have some areas that I want to just touch on. A sense of hope with what we see from the development of medications, from what medical science knows more of now, and the process of going through a transplant and what that entails. So for just a few minutes, I'd like to just talk to you about taking care of the caregiver, meeting that job head on with a cup full rather than a cup half empty. You've heard that story about the lemonade. All right. I have a creed for caregivers, and it goes something like this. You can take better care of your patient if you continually nurture yourself. Audrey talked about the exercise. I'm going to talk about a couple of other things that helped us and helped us to move a little smoother on the rocky road of myeloma at that point. Your goal is to survive with your patient. You need to outwit and you need to outplay that cancer cell, whatever it's going to do. And it takes some education, it takes some stick-to-itiveness, and it takes some patience, and it takes not exactly falling apart as you try to manipulate and go through this. I am so amazed with what HealthTree is doing, because it's like night and day from when we started out. Let's start with some of the basic things that we need to do. Some of those things Audrey touched on a little bit. You need to stay healthy, and because you'll see your patient, if in fact, depending on what level of multiple myeloma they have, whether it's smoldering or diagnosed with a heavier diagnosis, you'll find at times that they don't have the desire to eat right. I can remember fixing a meal, and nausea was so prevalent that he couldn't eat it, the meal he'd requested. And we went to the powdered Lipton soup in the little packet. You know, that was about all he could take down was the broth. I can't overemphasize the specific of getting enough sleep. I think sometimes at the end of the day, it was almost overwhelming to think of what was going through my mind on what we needed to do. And to try to get to sleep, sometimes having to be up at 3:30 in the morning or 4 o'clock to get to a PET scan, that was really difficult. Sometimes had to take something to help me knock myself out just so that I was rested to drive. Exercise. As much as some of us hate it, that is one of the gifts I consider in my life right now. Whether it's weight training or whether it's just getting outside of the house and walking. Especially during the pandemic, it's been really difficult because we have not felt confident going to a sports facility. We haven't gone to a lot of restaurants. I just considered my job to protect both of us so that we didn't, end up with COVID too on top of myeloma. Find healthy ways to give yourself a break. Whether it's taking the garbage out, going to get the mail, walking around the house, just kind of clear the air just a little bit of your head. One of my favorite things to do that my husband can't understand, I love to listen to the news. And then in the last 4 years, it's been harder to listen to the news. And so I've had to resort to going to books, but just something to give yourself a break. Don't neglect the emotional, the physical, or the spiritual health of you. Now, one of these things, and I know you're probably saying, if you're just new to myeloma, bless your heart. That's what I'll say to you right now. Start to become an expert on myeloma. Now, the options available to us 18 years ago were listening to general oncologists telling us that at the time, because the facility we were going to, which was a specialty center for myeloma, every oncologist we talked to said, you're going to kill your husband, which was really confident. It gave me a lot of confidence as I tried to negotiate finances and trying to figure out where we were going. But I would encourage you with the internet. Oh my goodness, is that the best gift we've been given in these 2021? Start to learn the names. I think of trying to even say dexamethasone or thalidomide. And those days I was just overwhelmed, let alone the cocktail that he got as a induction to a stem cell transplant. I would just repeatedly say to him, okay, phonetically tell me, because I have the teacher background, phonetically tell me how to spell that. And then I could kind of remember it. I think one of the things that helped me, and I don't know, Audrey mentioned a book, and I just checked today to see if it was still in publication, and I'll hold this up. Cancer, 50 Essential Things to Do. I read this 18 years ago. It's still in a publication, and it's absolutely been revised, and it's still excellent material as far as, okay, how do I navigate this? How do I get hope when I'm feeling so hopeless? I just thought it was an excellent kind of introduction to me to what the situation we were in. The next thing, how do you survive myeloma? Well, myeloma is a team sport, quite frankly. You need to be sure that you're taking advantage of the whole team. You know, a lot of doctors will group in the morning and they will discuss what needs to be done with a certain patient. Again, get a myeloma specialist. I can't emphasize that enough, because sometimes an oncologist, a general oncologist who is dealing with 200 different cancers cannot physically, mentally keep up to date on the latest and greatest with myeloma. Because if you've been told this, myeloma patients, when they are diagnosed, display their disease in multiple different ways. My husband, John, his disease displayed with what they call a plasmacytoma in his hip, which is a tumor that was diagnosed when he went to the knee doctor to get that fixed up, because he thought it was a knee issue with a meniscus. And the doctor said, oh, I'm sure that it's just referred pain. And he said, take an x-ray anyway. They took an x-ray and he said, you've got a lot more serious problem in your hip than you do in your knee. And that was when the fur hit the fan, because we were just stunned at that point. Because he had been active in medical military reserves for many, many years, had done the PT test. We raised a garden. We were a public health family. And so the, oh dear, this is really terrible, kind of hit us in the face. We have a specialist that we go see in another city, and then we have a doctor here in our local town, an internist that we see regularly, and also nurses in both places that help us. If you're at a multiple myeloma center, there will be probably a larger place. There will be a social worker who will help you work through. If you have to go a place for a transplant, they'll help you work through um, where you're going to stay, what's actually going to happen, what kind of facilities they have checked out for staying there. I know in the city we went to, they had different levels of accommodation. Some were like $10 a night, which my husband thought was a great deal. And I said, no, we're not staying there, because there were a lot of people smoking in the facility. And I was there to heal, not to inhale. Look to your family and friends. They can be such a great source to you, and have them take some of the responsibility. I know Roz has younger children that she was dealing with at the time we got diagnosed. We had most of our children out of the home or at universities at that time. One or two still were at home. That was very helpful to let them be in charge of the house as we left to go get medical treatment. Looked for an insurance specialist. That was the thing that blew me away because of the costs of this. We had insurance, and we'd had good insurance, but I was afraid if we took the treatment out of state with a specialist, and we were told that we would be denied insurance, and that makes your heart stop another time, that we could get the care we needed in our city with what they had there. And at one point in the care, we had to go through a review board and make a presentation while he was going through chemo to get the insurance reinstated. The people, when we went to this, they said, well, are you bringing your attorney? And I said, my attorney? I'm bringing my husband. He's the one who knows this. And he was able to, even though he felt rotten, explain to them that they were totally behind in our local state on this type of treatment at that time. There are therapists out there that can help you either with emotional situations or physical situations where for cancer patients. So many wellness centers are popping up all over the country. Patient support groups, much like Myeloma Crowd, Health Tree. This is so helpful just to hear other people's experiences and how they've navigated it. One of the things I would caution you about is I had as my husband was going to his first stem cell transplant, which I knew hardly anything about at that time, some older lady wanted to help me through it by telling me that when her husband had a transplant, he had a stroke right as they gave him his cells back. And I'm telling you, about that time, I had a stroke because I didn't think I was sending him down the river so bad. So kind of take what you hear with a grain of salt, rather than know that that's going to happen to your patient. The other thing that I would caution you on is be wary of well-meaning friends who have a remedy that will cure myeloma. There is no cure for myeloma yet, but we are so far along the road to having that for everybody. This is one of the first things that right out of the chute I think you ought to do, and that's become an advocate for your parent or for your patient. Keep records either in a medical book or on a device of the treatments done and the patient's response, like a iPad or MacBook or something like that, or a laptop. This is the book that we have had for 3 years, and we're going on 4. This was when his relapse started. And in that, because he is a physician first and a myeloma patient second, he wants to know everything. And I can get all his labs and stuff online, which is really, really helpful. But some of the more important ones and the things, the Kappa light chain and things that we're watching, we always try to have that in the book. We also have a place in the book for procedures that he had and how we responded. Journal notes, maybe how we're feeling that particular day. A directory of professionals that are helping us with phone numbers. And now, now we have phones, and I have my phone, but he had a secretary way too long. So he's not a phone guy particularly, although he does have one, but he likes it written down on the paper. Before you go to see your doctor, write down a list of questions you have, and ask those questions and get answers. Now, I know when you're saying, oh, I'm going to this all-wise doctor, don't be intimidated by that. They don't have a patient in their family that has myeloma, and you have much more experience in many ways than they have. And the only stupid question is the one you want to ask, but are too timid to ask. So I would just encourage you to say, hey, I needed this answered. And if the doctor doesn't have time, which is a lot of times the case, you need to corner a nurse and get your answer. I'd encourage you to keep a journal of your frustrations, your concerns, your triumphs. This is a lot of keeping a journal or writing down things is one thing that they really emphasize in people who have severe depression, or even depression that's not so severe, to just write it down and just kind of get it outside your soul.
And I think you accidentally muted yourself because I can't hear you anymore.
Because I'm using my desk.
No problem.
All right. Don't borrow trouble from the lady who tells you they had a stroke when they had a stem cell transplant. That's not going to happen. Don't let cancer define you. One of the things that I loved about my husband is he got recovered from the 2 transplants, and then he proceeded to train for not only a marathon, which he'd run previously to that, to having cancer start, but our kids had him, they wanted us to go with them to Orlando, where they have what they call the Dopey, and it's rightly named. I'm telling you, it is, because it's a 5K one day, a 10K the next, a half mile the third day, and a full mile or a full marathon the fourth day. Half marathon the third day, full marathon the fourth. And he got off the phone conversation that we'd said, yes, we'd be happy to go. But he was signing up, and I said, I don't think so. And his determination and his drive, he completed the Dopey in 6 months in Orlando with 3 or 4 of our children and 10 grandkids. And as he came over the finish line, I just kind of yelled, because 30,000 other people were coming over the finish line. And I said, excuse me, our dad and grandpa is coming in here. Could you move so these little grandkids can see this? And I'm not sure they realize the importance of it. I said, he's a cancer survivor. He's 70. He was 70 years old at that time. And the waters just kind of parted. And all these people said, what's grandpa's name? And this whole crowd of 30,000 relatives of other runners was cheering this grandpa as he came through. So he did not get it about letting cancer define himself. He just kept going. Journaling, I've talked about that. Look at some hobbies you might have just to play or to laugh. Music, gardening, parks, going to a park. I'm thinking of COVID right now. Parks, movies, cooking, reading. I think it was Al Franken on Saturday Night Live, and I don't want to take you to that level, but anyway, years ago, he used to say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and by darn, people like me. I may not be perfect, but parts of me are still excellent. So, it's move on past the diagnosis. I think many of us have seen this in cancer centers, that it does not have to define us by crippling our love. It does not have to cripple our love, shatter our hope, corrode our faith, destroy our peace, kill friendship, suppress memories, silence courage, invade the soul, steal eternal life, or conquer the spirit. It doesn't have to. With myeloma nowadays, there's so much hope for that. Now, there's just one area that I'm going to just touch on briefly. That was an issue when my husband was going through 3 transplants. And because he was known in the city we lived in a lot, there were so many people that wanted to know how he is. And they were concerned just by being kind. You know, I mean, that's the thing that brings you to tears sometimes, is the kindness of people. I better not talk about it because it gets me worked up. But, you know, trying to tell your story or how your patient is at certain points, it is exhausting, and it leaves you no strength to deal with what else you've got on your plate. So this is what we did during a transplant. Our son was a communications major, thank goodness. And I would tell him the updates on his dad, and we had people who signed up to wanting to know what was going on. That was the most helpful thing, in that it just kind of took it off my plate, took it off his plate, and I was free to do everything that we needed to do to get him helping. And when people would see me or ask me when I was in our hometown, I said, oh, we're just surviving, and just kind of move on, not give detail unless you have a special person that you wanted to be confident with. Another thing our daughter did on the last one was we had 300 armbands that people, I forgot to put that in, that people were wearing. And we had a song for him too on Facebook. Let's see, let's go to that last one. Okay, you can either take this, why me? And you do have that response, or lucky me. Because once you have cancer, you see life from a whole different way. You see things around you that inspire you, that make you so grateful for the blessings that you do have. So my advice to you is to find hope in your situation. Enjoy the journey. Sure, it's tough, but the thing that I never would have been able to see some of the experiences that we've had. Live intentionally. Make every minute count. And you know what? If you exude gratitude, you hardly have much time to dwell on what you're trying to deal with. Now, some people might have a faith or a philosophy or a sense of community, but cultivate that sense of being part of something larger than yourself. Faith plays a big part in our life, and I felt aided help at times when I needed it going through this. One of the best things is to just appreciate and be grateful for the healthcare workers who are going through who knows what now. But the strides that have been made in medical science is overwhelming. When I tell you there were about 3 drugs 18 years ago, and you see the list that your doctor puts in front of you, it's just absolutely dumbfounding. My favorite cartoon was from Family Circus. Yesterday's the past, tomorrow's the future, but today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. I hope you'll all appreciate the present that you have, and I thank you for being a part of the myeloma crowd and all of us going through the journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was powerful, and your experience is just so hopeful and so amazing. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to have Rosalind share her piece, and then we are going to open it up to questions, and I'll explain how we're going to try to do that in an organized way when Rosalind's done. But we will have time for questions and personal shares. So,
okay.
Rosalind,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Well, I apologize for the issue earlier. I'm not sure what that was, but now I'm glad we're working. Well, I think Anne's a gift. So I love that cartoon, Anne, because I think you're a gift to all of us. And I'm really honored to participate tonight and to get to learn together with all of you. You know, Anne's at one side of the spectrum and I'm at the other. My husband, Richard, was diagnosed almost 6 years ago at the age of 39. And we had 3 kids still have 3 kids, ages 11, 9, and 7. And it was just like it is for all of you, completely overwhelming and scary, and trying to figure out how do we tell our kids, how do we coordinate everything, and just went through one step at a time. And a piece of advice that was so helpful for me early on was when my husband was going through his transplant. He had to be admitted, and I was talking to the social worker and expressing my concerns and just fears, and she said, you know, it's not all about him. And I remember at first thinking, well, yes, it is. This is all about him. This is huge. And then I realized, wait, you're right. It's about me too. And I needed to take care of myself so I can take care of him and take care of our kids. And that was really good advice for me as I went on to try to balance all of that, balance my kids, my work. I worked in healthcare and soon found myself having compassion fatigue and burnout, like we've talked about tonight, and quickly realized I needed to utilize the resources that I had to recognize my boundaries, to talk, laugh, cry, all of those things that Anne and Audrey have so beautifully shared to help me keep perspective. I really jumped then to talk to anyone who could relate. Our family and friends were so well intended, but it was hard for them to understand really what was going on. And as people started kind of coming out of the woodwork or introducing me to someone else who was a myeloma caregiver, I would just jump to talk to them and to pick their brain. And it was hard to find someone in my similar situation, in my stage of life. And I often felt alone and felt scared. And it really took a conscious effort for me to try to do what I needed to take care of myself so that I could take, like I said, take better care of my husband and my family. There's been a lot of tips shared by Anne that are so helpful that really do make a difference. We've shared some articles on the Myeloma Crowd website about care for the caregiver that we'll share that article with you as well. And we just recently had 2 caregivers who are actually on the call, who are caregiver coaches, shared their insight and wisdom in an article we wrote on burnout. And I suggest you read that. We'll share that with you as well. And they have much more wisdom than I do, and a lot of great things to do and to put into practice that really can make a difference. I think the biggest thing that I've learned through the last almost 6 years is that I simply cannot do it alone, and that I have to rely on other people. I have to rely on my husband. He leans on me, I lean on him, and we maintain those roles in our relationship that we've always had that help bring us comfort and help us to continue to function and to lean on family and friends, even though it's hard. It's hard. I know for me personally, it's hard to open up about my fears and worries and things like that, but to make myself try to share and make that effort to open up, to let people be there for me, and also to rely on the myeloma community. I've just found such a supportive community of people that are willing to share their experience. I had the opportunity to become involved with the Myeloma Coach program. And for those of you who aren't aware of the program, it's a peer-to-peer support program where all of our coaches are either myeloma patients or caregivers who've decided they're willing to give back. They want to have a deep desire to give back and to share what they've learned to help others and to make it easier. And that program began in 2018. Jenny Alstrom had an idea and saw a need, and I was so grateful to be able to get involved. And now we have over 500 participants who work with 140 coaches, and they fill a need, that need for us to be able to have someone to talk to who can personally relate to what we're experiencing, who can understand, who can offer support, understanding, be that cheerleader, and really to help us to know that we're not alone. I've met incredible people through this program, people like Anne, and it's just reaffirming to know that there is someone that we can talk to. We can try to find someone who is in our stage of life, or who can relate to us, and to be able to offer those shared experiences together, and it's a real strength. How to do, Audrey? Right at 6.
That was awesome. Thank you. I'd like to bring this time now to the audience. And I will say, this was originally supposed to go till 6, but as Roz and Ann and I prepared, we realized we wanted to leave room for a group discussion or for people to ask questions or share briefly whatever they want to. We want this to feel like a connection. And because of the sheer amount of people we have registered, over 200 people with us with this specific event, you know, we're brainstorming ideas how we can split this group up so that it's more intimate and there are more connections. So the way that we'd like to do this, if you are willing to stay with us till 6:30, if not, totally understandable. And again, this is recorded, so if you ever want to come back and watch this section again or hear what questions were asked and answered, you're more than welcome to. But we're going to use the raise hand feature. So at the bottom of your screen, if you move your cursor or your finger to the bottom of the screen and the white bar pops up, there should be, or if you're on your phone at the bottom, there should be a hand icon. If you have something that you'd like to share or a question that you'd like to ask, feel free to click that raise hand button. And the system records like who asked it in a certain order, and my team will be working to make sure that that flows as smoothly as possible. If you don't feel comfortable actually asking your question, because we'll have you unmute and ask the question and talk to us, if you'd rather just put something in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that as well. But I'd like to turn the time over to the audience as well so that we can connect as myeloma caregivers.
Hey, so this is Cassandra. Sorry, I think we have Warren Hatcher up first. Warren, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, I'd like to add an experience that supplements two of Anne's slides. She talked about laughter and she talked about journaling. I want to couple those together. One of the things that we did, and during some of the worst times, was to write down the funny things that happened. One of them that I like to share is my wife, my caregiver, Tricia, would say, "You need a bath. Do we have any Scotch tape?" Which sounds weird, but I had tunnel dialysis catheters on my chest that had to be protected from getting wet. And I couldn't take a bath without suiting up with saran wrap and Scotch tape.
Thank you for sharing that, and way to bring laughter into your life. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Warren. That was great. So we have Sarita next. If you want to go ahead and ask your question, Sarita.
Let's see. Now we can, yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this group. This is really great. There's a couple things. I'd like to share a little bit of the things that I do to keep myself sane. And I have a question also about it. My wife got diagnosed in 2010, and she had an auto transplant. And I have to say that first year, we were crazy. We were like, what does this mean? Because the doctors told us, you have 2 years. No, they gave her 6 months to live, actually. And then they revised it to 2 years. And she has lambda light chain multiple myeloma with 13 deletions. So she has like, how do you say, I forgot the word. It changed. So it's a pretty serious myeloma. So in order to keep myself sane, I decided to write a book about it. And so I'm working on a graphic novel. And so what I would do is, while I was waiting for her in procedure, I was taking pictures of the hospital rooms and everything and doing sketches so that I could kind of process all of it. And that's been very helpful. The strange thing now that actually keeps me sane is doing algebra. So that's what I do. I do math, and it calms me down more than anything. I also have a small farm, so I'm outside a lot, walking around, carrying water, things like that. So all of that's very helpful. The question I have is that in 2009, my wife had a problem with the meniscus in her knee. And this is the third time, the second time I'm hearing that somebody had problems with their knee, and then afterwards they were diagnosed with multiple myeloma, kind of completely unrelated. And so I'm wondering, is there a connection actually between having a knee problem and then totally unrelated being diagnosed with multiple myeloma? So anybody have any ideas about that?
That is a question that I do not know the answer to, but how interesting. That's super interesting. And maybe, you know, in the chat, if you've had a similar experience, you can share it. And that's even something that we could look into, you know, just as a foundation, just kind of see through Health Tree Cure Hub if there's any precursor knee conditions or something like that. That's interesting. Super interesting. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing the things you do as well. I think I'm married to a math teacher, you know, algebra calms him down, but it sure stresses me out. So everybody's different. I admire you a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Cassandra, I think there's like it says unknown. So if you raised your, I don't know how to tell who it is though, because
Yeah, I can. Yeah, you just unmuted yourself. It just says unknown though. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Catherine.
Okay, hi, Catherine. Yeah, what's
Hi,
your question?
Andre. It was very interesting listening to Anne and Rosalind talk about you know, caregivers, and I was really interested in this because I met Andre at our multiple myeloma plasma cell leukemia meeting. So my husband has multiple myeloma plasma cell leukemia. And I think from what I understand, there's 30,000 multiple myeloma patients, but only 130 patients have the plasma cell leukemia. So we were married on 2018, and my husband found out he had the plasma cell leukemia in 2019. So for a year and a half, I've been caring for him. And I mean, we love each other very much. And I think what keeps us very strong is that we're both Christians, and we do pray a lot because last year, the same time in January, he was only given 2 to 3 days to live. And I told the doctors, no, there's power in prayer, and proceeded to, you know, get in contact with all our prayer warriors, and we reached thousands of people, and he's still living today. He's had 2 auto stem cell transplants. And so what I felt as a caregiver, I never thought of me, because all I've done was, I mean, we're like joined at the hip. And so like if I would do laundry, I'll sit down and I'm with him. If I was cooking, after I finish, I sit down with him. I clean the house, I'll sit down with him. So I wasn't physical anymore. And right after Christmas, after a year and a half of caring for him, after Christmas, out of the blue, I didn't know anything about this. I had a full-blown panic attack, and it was very scary. And then after that, the anxiety stayed until way into January. Then I started having chest pains, and then I went to the doctor, and EKG was good. And then 2 Fridays ago, I went to the hospital because the pain just wouldn't go away. So the EKG was good, the echocardiogram was good, blood work was good, and I felt that I need to take care of me, or I'm not going to take care of him. The panic attacks were really scary. The anxiety was unbelievable. And you mentioned a lot of the things, Andre. You mentioned, you know, what we had, you know, what goes on with a lot of people, you know, especially my heart. I would wake up at midnight and it was going about 150 beats a minute. I wouldn't get scared. I would just throw cold water on my face. And then it really went back. I started doing deep breathing, praying, and it would be normal again. So basically what I've done now is I'm always praying. So I have my moment time, my quiet time with God. But I actually had to get some Celexa. So, and I'm more holistic. I don't like to take anything, but I've increased my exercises now. Because of the virus, I can't go anywhere. So I do it on YouTube, and I do walking and Zumba and things like that. I changed my diet. I just eat clean, healthy diet. There's no sugar added, and everything is just more like the Mediterranean diet. And I think that just takes care of our bodies. I'm going to see a therapist as well, because it's nice. We're going to do Zoom calls, and that will be nice and helpful. I started taking a yoga class too with some ladies that we actually do. So I think it's really important what you mentioned about caregivers taking care of ourselves. Now I don't sit next to my husband 24/7. I get back into sewing, or I'm doing some crafts now. In fact, I even include him on let's build a puzzle together. And so, and I'm fortunate. I do have a husband that he doesn't get angry. He's just a really easy person to care for. But I'm the big baby, I cry a lot. But I think with the help that I've gotten, I'm a lot more patient now. Like, as far, not patient, but I'm more calm. So it is very important to get the help that we need. And I want to thank you guys for this opportunity to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. It's good to see you again, and thank you for sharing that. And
You're welcome.
I like that you shared too that sometimes medicine is needed, even if we are looking for more different approaches. And that's not something that I mentioned tonight, but there is no shame in, if you are meeting with a therapist or a counselor, if you need some medication, that is also an incredible option.
I agree. And I felt it was important because my doctor knows that I don't like medication, and I do things holistically, but she said it has serotonin in it. And it took about 2 weeks to kick in, but it is very helpful, because I think my stress was going to get me in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, blood pressure was high and all that too. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's see. So we have Bill Price. Bill, what question do you have for us?
Sure. Hey, thanks. Number one, just thanks so very, very much for this forum. This is just wonderful to be able to come together and to share a bit. I have two quick things. One is just a kind of an ironical bright side of things, and the other is an observation that maybe would set up some things for the group for the future. The bright side thing is, you mentioned at the very beginning, the stress that we all feel with COVID. I often think of that as kind of a weird sort of blessing to us, because it's made so many people stay at home, and I need to be at home with my wife. So that's been an interesting kind of COVID blessing. So that's a weird two words to put in the same sentence. But the observation that I've got is that a lot of my issues, I think, when it gets to more emotional, deal with the fact that I'm a husband of a wife with myeloma. And there's some strange and weird dynamics that happen to husbands that are put in the caregiver role. And that might be something that maybe as a group we can leverage going forward and break off for men. I don't mean to divide by gender or whatnot, but there's some weird things that happen to a woman who needs her husband to be a husband and not to be a caregiver. And that's some of the main issues that I tend to deal with. So
I think that's a great point, Bill, and just those differences in roles that come up. And one thing that we're going to do is we have a survey that Audrey will be sending out to you, because we would love to know what needs there are and how we could best meet the needs of this community. We talk a lot to myeloma patients. We provide so much education about myeloma and all that, but we want to know, for caregivers, what can we do? What programs, what supports can we provide you that would be most helpful? So that's great insight, and we'd love it if you'd take a few minutes and complete that survey, because it would help us to be able to tailor things to meet your needs best.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. So the next person I see here is Bobby Vidmar.
Okay,
Bobby.
I think I have it now. Can you
Oh, there
hear
you go.
me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, my husband was diagnosed a little over a year ago, and he started out with just taking some chemo locally, and then we did the stem cell transplant, so we were gone. And I just have a lot of ups and downs. I guess today was one of my down days. I'm trying to deal with getting him revaccinated, and I'm sure you've all went through that too after stem cell, to where you got to get the vaccines. Do you go, I was just, do we go to the pharmacy? Do we go to the doctor's office? We went to the doctor's office for the first round, and then the insurance doesn't want to pay for it there. And I just get overwhelmed at times. But also kind of going with what Bill was saying about COVID, this was one thing that struck me when I was getting ready. I didn't send out Christmas letters last year because he had just been diagnosed. We didn't know what was going on. And I'm typically every other year Christmas letters. So I thought this year I have to. Most people knew the ups and downs of where we'd been the last year. But the blessing, I thought, how am I going to do this? And then I started thinking of the blessings. And so many of the COVID restrictions has really been a blessing to us, because not only is he isolated from the transplant, and as you all know, with transplant, you really have to be careful, but everybody else was doing it too. And the way everybody, like, I haven't been in a grocery store. I have all delivery or pickup, basically. Everything is, you can make those arrangements, which a year ago, they weren't available. They weren't advertised. You didn't know what was available. So that's really been a blessing to have that available to us at this point. But I have my ups and downs, and, because of the COVID, my kids are staying away because they don't take it serious. And I guess I have trouble reverting back after going through having to be so careful and be, clean, keep everything immaculate, sanitized and stuff. And I have some trouble letting go of that and saying, okay, it's okay if we do this. It's okay if we do that. And so I just have a lot of trouble, and then I get all emotional and go up and down. So,
Bobby, I think that's completely normal. Well, I can completely relate to what you're saying of the emotional ups and downs, and just the fears too, coming off transplant. You're used to being so vigilant and intense, and then with COVID on top of it, such a natural way to feel. But myeloma is definitely an emotional roller coaster, and it's a tricky one to balance sometimes. I admire you, both you and Bill, for looking for the silver linings, though. I feel like that really does help.
thanks.
Thank you so much, Bobby. So the next one we have here is Wayne Brimhall. Wayne, if you want to go ahead and mute yourself.
Okay, this is actually Wayne's wife, Nancy.
Oh, hi, Nancy.
Hi. I think it's important to realize how much variability there is in our different reactions to stress, and that sometimes we may have sailed through what seems like a very stressful event only to fall apart afterwards. Or that what I think of is about 8 years ago, and this was before my husband needed treatment for myeloma. He was in smoldering, but he was okay. Going on at the same time, I had him have to have an abdominal surgery, and it went bad, and he was very ill. And my elderly parents were starting to fall apart and need to move to assisted living and have medical needs and so forth. So I had all of this going on at once. And I fortunately didn't have financial issues or kids or some of the other issues some of you have. But what I found after a while, I was questioning my mind. I was questioning my memory. I was questioning whether I was starting to get dementia. I actually went to a neuropsychologist and got tested. And, after things had settled down some, I realized that most of that was, in fact, just from the chronic stress of having to deal with so much.
Yeah, that is actually something that came up in my studies as well, is kind of what those panic attacks or even memory lapses, that's a very real thing, that when your body is trying to tell you that it's burned out, that those systems start shutting down. And it can actually, too much stress can actually lead to liver failure, heart failure, indigestion, what is that called? Digestive failure. It's a big deal. So it is important that while, yes, we are caring for somebody with a chronic illness, we are headed towards illness if we keep in this burnout cycle, if that makes sense.
Did you want to add something, Anne?
Let me unmute. One other thing that I would let you know, that it is normal to have a degree of difficulty in concentrating, especially when you're going through the hard parts, the transplants, the dealing with a companion who is so sick. But that does come back when it lessens just a little bit, but that's very normal. The other lady who commented about getting immunizations after transplants, you should have information, Bobby, from a healthcare worker on where you can get that, or they could give you some information on where your insurance will pay for it. So I would explore a pharmacy or the doctor's office or a health department. They should offer that, work out something with the insurance that you do have.
Okay, perfect, Nancy. Thank you so much for your question, or sorry, for your comment. And then we have one more, Yasmin. Says Yasmin S.
Hi. I don't have my camera on. This has not been a good week for me. So I don't think anybody should be seeing me. It looks like my husband and I are newbies in terms of his diagnosis. He was diagnosed in August. We did all the right things, everything that Anne said. As soon as he was diagnosed, I got him to Sloan Kettering in New York City. We live in New York, upstate New York. So we've done all the right things, read everything. He just had his auto transplant, but I am being lost in all this. He just is 10 days out from his transplant, and I just had to leave. I knew he was in hospital. I know there are blessings to COVID, but it has been difficult for me because I can't get anyone to come in to help. And he presented with a lot of fractures, included a fractured sternum, fractured pelvis. So a lot of everything fell on me. I actually am an attorney, but I stopped working because I knew he can't drive. He could barely walk sometimes. And we were actually stuck in New York City since the 31st of December. Went for one appointment. We were headed home, and his pain presented again from one of the fractures. I said, you know what, we're turning around because the local hospital can't deal with this, and we're so close to Sloan. Let's just head back there. He was there for 21 days, and we came home for 2 days. I tried to do a turnaround because he just wanted to come home, see the pets. But I nearly killed myself doing that because I'm the one doing the drive-in. Then we went straight into harvesting, straight into transplant. And on Sunday, I just said, I told him, his face fell, and I nearly changed my mind, but I knew I just had to get away, and his numbers were tanking. So I said, this is a good time for me to leave. I didn't tell him that, but because he's at risk, and I'm coming and going from a hotel to visit him every day. But it really has been a difficult week because I've come home and there's bills and there's mail and there's cleaning. My daughter, other than my daughter, I don't have any family up here. I'm a transplant to New York State. And much as my family wants to come help, I can't. With COVID, I can't take the risk of them coming and quarantining, etc., because they're going to be in the house anyway. So everything everyone said, I can relate to the memory loss. I said, thank God I'm not working, but because I'm trying to rack my brain, how did I find this group? I have no clue. I have no clue how I found this group. I do so much reading on it. I don't do algebra. I'm not going to try that, Sarita, sorry. I've tried journaling. I'm not a person who likes to put my thoughts and feelings on paper. I thought it would be a good thing. It just doesn't work for me. A lot of prayer, a lot of friends pray for us. Zumba is my life. I exercise every day pre-COVID. I extended my stay at home. I came home for 2 days and I've extended it, and I'm hoping to get into my Zumba class tomorrow. They have so far said no because I had suspended my gym membership, but I'm going to go plead my case because just for my sanity, I just need to do Zumba in person. And that's the problem. I find myself getting lost in all this, and I need help, and it's just with COVID, I can't find that help, and he's very attached to me, and relies on me a lot, because the pressure is there every day. I didn't eat lunch, I didn't eat dinner. You need to eat. I can't be there. You need to eat. And he calls me on Monday and says, I'm not feeling well. I just threw up. And I said, well, Dave, I'm in Albany. Can you ask your nurse for some assistance? Rather than call a nurse, he calls me, kind of thing. So it is a difficult road. But thank you. When I read that Anne had 17 years as a caregiver, I said, I'm barely 6 months in, and just trying to hold it together. And Rosalind with kids, because usually I'm a lot more positive, because I think we don't have kids, thank God, and it's just the two of us, and we could afford for me to stop working for now and just take care of him. But this is just a down week. But thank you. As I said, I don't remember where I found this group, but I'm grateful that I found it. Thank you so much.
Oh, we're so grateful you found it. And you know what, Yasmin, I would say you are keeping it together quite well. This is a heightened time of challenge for you, and I'm impressed, and I hope that from anything tonight, you know that you're not alone, and we're here for you in your journey, and keep, right? Any words of wisdom for her, Anne?
Yeah, I'm just so impressed with what she's carrying. That's all I can say is you go, girl. You are doing fantastic. And I think it seems at different stages, it seems like you're just barely hanging on by your fingernails, but it will get better. And the COVID issue has become just unbelievable. It has its pros in that we're all at home, but it's got some very difficult things to try and navigate when you've got a sick husband. So you have our respect. Outstanding. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
One thought too is to reach out to the social worker at Sloan and see if they can help you identify some resources for maybe some home care or different things like that for when he is able to come home, that could be some supports to you. That's something that you could look into.
We do qualify and everything for it, but I just worry about someone coming in who has, probably been to other houses, seeing other patients. I'm so scared.
Right.
He's in such a vulnerable, especially with his transplant and everything now.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's just so difficult. And then, because even with the COVID vaccine, I'm actually a first responder, also volunteer. So I can get my vaccine, but I worry if I have a reaction, I won't be able to take care of him, because then I've got a lot of allergies. So I have
Honey, you are
days.
doing it all. God.
You are. Well, I admire you for taking care of yourself right now too, and recognizing, what you need. And like we've talked about tonight, that is so important. It's so hard to do, but it is so important. So
Yeah.
my hat is off to you. I'm so glad you were here tonight.
One thing about vaccines, I have had both of them, Pfizer, and hardly any response other than a tender arm for 24 hours. So only about a third of people who get the vaccines now are having huge response. You can't guarantee it, but I wouldn't worry about it until it's awful.
Okay.
Just
Unfortunately,
don't borrow any trouble. Just say, I can do this,
unfortunately, my 2 opportunities to get it as a first responder passed. So I'm trying to get it in New York City as a first responder still, but they're out of vaccines everywhere I check.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you to each of you. There's actually still a significant amount more than I thought left, but thank you each for taking that virtual time to be with us. I know you put maybe dinner on hold or other things on hold so you could be here, but doesn't it feel good to be in a community of people that are going through the same thing? And we might all be in different stages, but we're here together, and that's powerful. I'd like to thank you each for coming. And as we wrap up, just please know that I was nervous about this. I prepared for this, but this exceeded my expectations, and it's because of your participation. So I'd really like to thank you. Let me do a couple outro announcements, and then you're free to head on your way. When will our next meeting be? Our next meeting is on March 11th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Eastern. And we are going to be discussing how to lovingly care for your spouse when they have horrible side effects. So how to, or not even spouse, because some of you are children of myeloma patients. So or perhaps parents. So wherever you are, how to take care of your loved one as they go through awful side effects. That's what we're going to be talking about on March 11th, 2021. Upcoming events that you might be interested in our myeloma community program. On Tuesday, February 16th at 11 a.m., we are going to be talking about diet and supplements. This is part of our nutrition and wellness event. We have Dr. Urvi Shah from MSK. She's going to be talking to us, and this is part 2 of her series. She's amazing. You won't want to miss that. Even if you can't make it at that designated time for any of the events, if you can't make it at the designated time, sign up so that you can get the recording. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention this, but this recording will be sent to all registrants. Maybe I didn't forget. Maybe it's just nighttime and I'm forgetting. But 24 to 48 hours after this event closes, we are going to be sending this recording to you along with the slides that I shared. I'll add some notes in there as well about the stressor and the stress that I shared. We'll be sharing Anne's slides as well. I just wanted to give that heads up. On Wednesday, February 17th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, 3 p.m. Eastern, we'll have our Connect with the Myeloma crowd event. This is going to be the creation of Health Tree University. We want to show you how Health Tree University came about, show you the people who are working behind the scenes, and also ask for your input on what free classes we should add to our curriculum. On Thursday, February 18th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll have our newly diagnosed myeloma patients event. We're going to be talking about why physicians are optimistic about newly diagnosed myeloma, and Dr. Sarah Lee from UW Medical Center is going to be moderating that Q&A. In order to sign up for any of these events or even additional events that I don't have mentioned here, go to www.myelomacrowd.org/events. Another special thanks to our community event sponsors, without whom this would not be possible: Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. And again, the biggest thanks to you for sharing this time, for helping me in my launch, my team in the launch of this Myeloma Caregivers chapter. I can't wait to see you next month. Thank you all and have a great night.